from the
government, and I'm here to
help.
Welcome back to the Johnson Express podcast. Before we get started, we want to say thank you for all your support. Our social medias have been doing great, especially our TikTok, which we just recently got. Said we'd never get it, but we broke down and got it anyways, and it's been doing great.
We appreciate all your feedback, all the comments, all the likes. Email us at johnsonexpress534@gmail.com and let us know any ideas you got.
And if you have any suggestions, you can send them to our email, or you can DM us on Instagram. You can send us a message on Truth or Twitter. Any of those are fine. We don't have a Facebook, so
probably won't.
Probably not going to get a Facebook, so don't message us on Facebook.
But that's going to wrap up all the announcements. We're going to hop into today's video. We got a special guest from our job.
So this is, tell them who you are.
I'm Kevin Rowland, and I work with these guys.
We picked him because he's a pretty knowledgeable guy on the subject of the JFK assassination, as you guys saw by the title, and we want to get just a regular American's viewpoint of some knowledge that they have on the JFK assassination. Plus, me and John aren't very informed on this. We already made a video. It wasn't that great.
We was all over the place.
And I think he can help us improve on that. So, first off, tell us why this is such an important topic to you.
I think this is important for Americans, all Americans. I know this is something that happened over half a century ago. You know, we're coming up on 60 years.
Dang.
But it's something that we know. It's really, we know the government knows what happened.
Yeah.
And they know that they know what happened. And they just kind of refuse to release the facts because they think it's going to, they always say national security reasons of that, but it's like just wanting to know. I started researching this when I was a kid. My dad was always really interested in this.
Yeah.
And I sat down with him one day when I was a child, and I guess when he thought I was old enough to understand. I knew of Kennedy for a while before I actually started watching and figured out really what happened.
Yeah.
And all, but it's interesting to me because he is the most charismatic he was
The youngest president.
Also the first president born in the 20th century.
Yep.
Yeah.
He followed up Eisenhower, who was a much more grandfatherly kind of figure to the country.
Yeah.
And then you're immediately
going on to this
young guy with this beautiful wife and beautiful family, and he was just a star, you know.
And it all ended, and nobody knows what happens but the government.
Well, I mean, yeah, pretty much. That's kind of.
I mean, some of the articles are out there, which I guess we'll talk about here in just a little bit. So, let's start from the beginning. Let's start with JFK's life. So, as far as we were talking about this at work personally, and his dad kind of pushed the presidency on him, but initially it was his brother.
Right.
So let's get a little insight into that.
Okay, JFK was born in May of 1917 in Boston, Massachusetts. He was the second of 9 children.
9 children.
8 brothers and sisters. Right. Okay, so his grandparents immigrated here. They were politicians. Honey Fitz, I'm not 100% sure. I haven't researched him. I think one of them was like Honey Fitzpatrick or something. I think that was his mother's dad. But he was like a congressman in Boston, some sort. And his dad was a movie film producer in like the 20s, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
And I think he saw the turn going from the power being in money and Wall Street and stuff to politics. And I think that's what inflamed him. He wanted all of his children to go into politics. But Joe Jr., his parents were Joseph P. Kennedy and Rose Kennedy. That was his parents. His oldest brother, Joe Jr., he was tagged. He apparently had it all. He was cut out. He was going to be president. He was in the eyes of his father. JFK grew up with a very sickly kid. He was red last rites when he was 4 years old. He had scarlet fever.
And this is John F. Kennedy, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then just a series, just totally sick all the time. You know, hospitalized.
Didn't they forge his documents to get into the army or the military?
His dad had a lot of money and could fix things, and that's what I've always heard. That's what I've always read.
Well, I mean,
but they
it's
fixed
kinda
his
evident.
records to get in anyways.
Yep.
What did he serve? What was he in?
He was in the Navy.
As a Navy.
Yeah. So 1940. So okay. Anyway, so I guess 1945, something like that. Joe Jr. was killed in he was a fighter pilot.
Okay, yeah, I think I remember reading that.
He was flying a mission. He had already finished up his missions, but by this point, Jack had already the P-2109, the Japanese destroyer, rammed into his boat, and he saved some lives. And JFK was already considered a war hero at this point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Jr. kept flying because he was trying to
Top his brother.
Basically.
Well, it was his little brother, too.
He didn't have to fly anymore. You know?
Yep. So he just chose to do it so he could show up his little brother.
I think that's what it had to do with, probably. But anyways, he was killed. So then the burden of
The presidency
his dad, one of his kids was going to be president.
Yeah.
He was held bound. You know.
He wanted to make sure that was going to happen.
So
No, you're fine.
but it was like that was going to have to happen. He was so basically his dad, Joseph P. Kennedy was he served on he was the ambassador to England during the Franklin Roosevelt terms. Ambassador to Great Britain, Joseph P. Kennedy. Okay, so this was right around the time of World War II, and he made some comments about. It kind of seemed like he was appeasing.
Ambassador to England.
Ambassador to England, okay. Well, he made some comments, sort of, kind of, maybe, possibly appeasing Hitler a little bit. He wanted the United States to stay out of the war.
Okay.
That was viewed widely by the American public as just not cool, you know.
Until
his
Pearl Harbor.
political career was ruined at that point. So I think that's what made him decide one of my kids is going to be president.
Gotcha.
That's what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
I think he wanted, naturally, if you have children, you want your children to do better than you.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the way it should be. Unfortunately, I don't think it is that way now. But
That's basically, that was his, in a nutshell, that was his early life.
So he grew up a gifted child.
yeah,
And after his brother died, he was pretty much thrown into, you're going to be a president, pretty much.
That's pretty much everything I've always researched. It was like, it wasn't even necessarily he really wanted to do that, but he was pressured by his father to follow a political career.
Can you tell us about that story of JFK in the Navy in the submarine that was hit with a
The story PT-109?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, he's in the South Pacific. There's some. It's in the middle of the war, and their ship he was the captain of the ship. It was slammed by a Japanese destroyer and cut in two. So he basically what they had to do is they had to swim to an island, maybe a few miles away or something. Maybe I'm not sure on the exact distance, but he swam to an island, and the story is that he grabbed one of his cadres' life jacket, who was injured, with his teeth, and swam across to the island and saved this gentleman.
Wow.
You know, so that's all I really know about that.
So JFK had some balls.
Yeah,
I
no
was like,
kidding. I wouldn't do
wow.
that.
No.
There's no way I could. There's no way I could do that. And this was this is also the same kid that was born with a few, deficiencies or diseases or stuff.
By this time, he had already been in and out of the hospital growing up. He grew up in a hospital pretty much.
Yeah.
Wow.
He had later on in life, he was eventually diagnosed with Addison's disease, which is like a deficiency of the adrenal glands. I don't really know that much about the disease other than that, but it's apparently pretty rough.
You said it's called Addison's disease?
Right.
Addison's disease is a long-term... Oh, and a
He ain't got his
long-term
glasses.
endocrine disorder resulting from insufficient amounts of hormones released by the adrenal glands, a pair of walnut-sized organs above the kidneys. So, and it says urgent medical attention is usually recommended in severe cases by healthcare providers, can be dangerous or life-threatening if untreated, very rare, and is treatable by medical professionals and requires lab tests or imaging. So, so he had some tests done to confirm that this was
Right.
that this is what he had.
Several surgeries. He was, like I said, he was ready to last right.
Wow.
1954, I think. I think is whenever. I think so, because I think him and Jackie were married in 1953
Yeah,
or 1954, and I think that he had this operation done that did not go well.
He married Jackie.
55, 50, 54, 55, something
He
like
married
sounds about
Jackie
right.
September 12th of 53, so
Right.
he had the surgery after.
that. Right,
Okay.
and then it was a long process of healing. I know that.
Yeah, I can
Eventually-
imagine.
Eventually, as you know, all the rumors of the using narcotics and stuff like that, he was reliant on these medications.
Yeah. Well,
He had his own personal physician. They called him Dr. Phil.
you know, I've heard a lot of people talking about that with even current presidents. They're saying, talking about Joe Biden, which we talked about in a previous video, where with his, mental decline. But not even that. They even said it with Trump. There's been several people that said that he needed some kind of medication in order to stand up and speak for as long as he did.
Right.
Don't know how true it is, but I mean, there is a history of presidents doing that, and I
Right.
think it's crazy to see that it carries on to current times.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think with him, it was kind of he had an ailment.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
couldn't
Well,
survive without these
yeah,
things.
he was
wanted
more-
to. Actually, today he was inaugurated, so it was frigidly cold. I
Mhm.
mean, it was so cold.
Yep.
That morning they had basically had to plow the streets because of
For the
how
snow?
much ice
Wow.
and snow
Oh,
was
wow.
out. And he wouldn't wear a big coat. He wanted to wear it just to show that young, vitality.
Yeah. I wonder if that had any effect on him.
Yeah, I bet his back
I'm
was
sure
bothering
his
him
back
real
was hurting
bad.
really
Yeah, I
bad
bet.
after that. Yeah, so I just find him to be fascinating. I find the whole story to be fascinating. That family to be fascinating.
Yep.
I actually have a daughter who is on the way.
Oh, yeah, that's
Here
right.
In the
That's
next
right.
month, her name is Kennedy.
Yep. I remember
So,
you telling
yeah.
me that.
Named
Congratulations on
Yep,
that, buddy.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Appreciate that.
But so let's fast forward to
Get to the.
John F.
Wait,
Kennedy's inauguration, like right or even the election,
Okay,
if you
so-
want to.
The election, this is awesome. So the election, they were actually Nixon. He ran against Richard Nixon, which we all know Nixon. He became
Yeah.
president later on.
And he was
Watergate
famous
and all
for
that.
the Watergate scandal. Yeah, of course.
Nixon was Eisenhower's vice president.
Okay.
So Kennedy decides he's going to run.
And this
And
was
he
Nixon's
does-
first term running as well for president, right?
Yeah, Eisenhower's 8
yeah,
years were up.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So Nixon decides he's going to run, and Nixon is the early favorite until they start. They were the first debates, the 1st televised debates
Oh, ever?
Yeah, ever.
ever
Wow.
were Kennedy and Nixon.
We need to go back and watch some of those,
And-
John.
Those would be
And,
some good clips.
So it's like Nixon seems to be the favorite, and then the debates start, and people are just fascinated with this young guy who stands up there, and he sounds different, and he looks different, and he's good looking, and he looks so different than all the.
Yeah.
It seems like all the politicians before him were like these sort of just old fat bald,
Very
just
boring
Yeah.
because
Yep.
they only had the radio before the.
right.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so it turns out to be one of the closest elections in history. Kennedy won. I mean, it was barely,
This popular vote, it is 0.17%.
That's how much Kennedy won by?
That's the popular vote, but the electoral votes was 303 to 219. But
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't really know how they did it back then.
And
Yeah.
we'll have a map
It
up.
was
Yeah.
it was a close election, but it was like as far as popular vote, I guess.
Oh yeah, that's very close.
All right. So he wins, and immediately after he wins, it's like just the whole country is just swept off their feet by this young, charismatic, dynamic leader who was just like so different than anything I've ever seen before.
Oh, I want to point out, even though it was a close election, didn't he have an extremely high approval rating really early on, like 80-something%?
I don't know. I can't really.
I think we saw that in the last video.
Yeah, I want
We
to
He
say
had-
does
we've talked
now.
about
Anybody's list now, he's in the top 3.
Oh,
to
yeah,
5.
yeah.
Yep.
Every list you look at.
Mhm.
Now I would say he didn't get a lot done. As much as he started it, but a lot of bills he did. There
Yeah.
were not many bills that bore his name. A lot of
Yeah.
stuff happened
Yeah.
because of him. You know,
Yeah, I
Like
think
the civil rights.
he stopped a lot of corrupt stuff. Yeah,
his
civil rights.
his big civil rights bill. He had sent that to Congress and introduced it to Congress, but he was killed before that got passed.
Yeah, unfortunately.
That didn't happen until like the late 60s,
That
right?
was 64.
Oh, 64.
So
okay.
that was,
so it was only a year.
right after his
Okay.
assassination.
They
Wow.
pretty much passed it in his honor.
Oh, good.
Good deal.
Lyndon Johnson.
Well, not good deal because he died, but I'm just saying. it's
Yeah,
good
Lyndon
they passed
Johnson
it.
was honestly Lyndon Johnson was a better politician than JFK
Okay.
as far as working the legislators and getting stuff done.
Mhm.
So he was more persistent with his colleagues.
He was just more experienced. He was the Senate Majority Whip
Yeah.
before he became the Vice President. JFK put him on a ticket to get Texas.
Yeah.
Yep.
Really, that was
Yep.
really the big reason why. So anyways, yes, presidency begins, and immediately there's this talk of this.
Hey, hold this just a little bit closer to you.
So immediately there's this talk of this secret plan they got to go. This was brought in the Eisenhower years. Kennedy's big mistake was not just saying no. He
Mhm.
let these guys in the CIA and
He
these
trusted
generals.
him too much.
They let them talk him into doing it, But basically, we had trained a bunch of Cuban exiles, and we were going to send. JFK did not want America's fingerprints on this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He wanted this to be a
He wanted to be
strictly.
neutral in the situation.
We're going to train you. Go overthrow your government. So, anyways, they set out. It's April of 1961. They set out to go do it, and it is just an unmitigated disaster from the beginning. It does not work out. So they're calling, hey, we need air help. This is going bad, and he won't do it.
No.
He doesn't want to be publicly.
I'm not
known
doing it.
for
I'm
yeah.
not starting, they from the get go, and that. So he came out immediate. This is 1961 April. He became president January 1961.
Yep.
So you got to think.
So he's
January,
only a few
February.
months in,
He's
yeah.
a few months in,
He's
and
like
this
3 months
and this
in.
crap happens, and it's like
This
such
is
a bad.
like the height
it's
of
such
the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Well, this is called Cuban Missile Crisis was 1962. This was the start of the animosity, I think,
Gotcha.
Okay.
to where it really led into that.
Okay.
So immediately after the Bay of Pigs happens, he comes out and he takes the blame for it.
Mhm.
That's really what kept his approval up. Was
He
anytime
was a
something
honest-
happened,
Yeah.
He took the blame.
he stood up there and said, "Look, it's my fault. I'm the responsible officer of the government. This is my fault."
Well, he has
Americans-
that accountability and that responsibility, and I think that's what a lot of politicians lack now. That's why
Right.
nobody has a high of an approval rating anymore.
Right.
But that was definitely one thing that benefited him as
But,
far as his
And his
presidency.
yeah. So,
oh.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so let's move up to the Cuban Missile Crisis, kind of the the whole interference between Cuba and Russia.
Well, right before that. Okay. So I think maybe June. You have to check me on this. June 61, July. Maybe it could have been earlier than that. He goes for a summit to meet Khrushchev for the first time. I can't remember exactly where it was. I want
How do you spell that guy's name?
Geneva, maybe
How
something.
do you spell
like
Khrushchev's last name?
I don't know.
Name?
It's Russian.
Yeah,
KR.
June 61.
June 61. Okay, so he goes and for a summit, and
Ah.
it doesn't go well. Khrushchev thinks he can just throw Kennedy around. He thinks that he can do everything that he's wanted to do. He can do now
He
because
depicts.
this little loser.
Yeah, I
is
was about to say he
president,
thinks that he's just got a little
Right.
kid there that doesn't know what he's talking about. Yeah, that would
Right.
make sense.
So okay, so now that we got that, the Cuban Missile Crisis. So that's 62.
Mm-hmm.
This was in October 62. So all these situations are happening at this point.
At
in
a
time.
fast rate for him.
September 62 was the James Meredith incident Ole Miss.
So I don't believe I've heard of this. Can
what is
you
that?
can you tell us about that?
Okay, so this it has to do with how he was passing. He was basically doing all he could for civil rights, knowing he was outnumbered in the Congress at that point in time. Anything, basically, he would always say, "What's the point of raising heck and sending the bill up there if we know we're going to lose?"
Yeah,
You know?
no kidding. That's like
So
just
people,
wasting taxpayers'
and
dollars.
a lot of the colored folks gave him flack for not doing enough. When really it was like he just couldn't get anything done.
Yeah, because he was for civil rights.
Basically, what he did, if you go back, you can look at a lot of his speeches during 61, 62. He's going around and convincing people to vote for, at that point in time, Democratic congressmen, so they can change these things. You know.
Mhm.
That's basically all. He goes around and that's what he's trying to get them to do. But anyways,
Well, he was a Republican.
he was a Democrat.
JFK?
Yeah, JFK was Democrat.
And Lyndon B. Johnson was also a Democrat?
Right.
Okay, I thought for some reason they were two different parties. I'm sorry. I remember we talked about that at work earlier today. I was like,
did
that's
we?
so stupid. Yeah.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, we
Yeah.
did. Okay. So anyway, so James Meredith. This is the Ole Miss. There's actually a documentary, ESPN. It's one of those 30 for 30s. It's called Ghost of Ole Miss.
Ghost of Ole Miss.
It's really
We'll
good.
link
It's
that in
really
the description.
good. It's really good and educational on what happened during this situation. But basically, the federal government. There's this guy, James Meredith. The only thing that makes him ineligible to go to the University of Mississippi where he wants to go is the fact that he's a black man. He meets all the criteria other than that. You know, so he fights it and they go to court. And the ruling is made that he's to be registered at Ole Miss.
Mhm.
So he goes there to register.
Oh, yeah, in 1962.
And
they
the,
didn't like that.
and the governor of Mississippi basically shut it down. It was a long to do. But
Yeah.
anyway, so this had just happened. This was like a month before the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Oh my goodness, dude!
All these things are happening. It's like flying at your face, nonstop.
So they're just pitching him curveballs left and right.
That's what it seemed like, you know. All these things happened in his presidency, and he was president for about 1,000 days.
And it's,
You
and
know?
it still didn't really deter the American population's, kind of support for him. It doesn't seem like
It's hard to know what people thought back then.
Yeah, exactly.
What other president could have kept their head on as much as he did? All
It's
that
hard to
crap
say.
that he took.
It's
Yeah,
hard
I
to
mean,
say.
and that's one of the big things I criticize Donald Trump about is his outrage. But in some instances, I liked it. So it just depends. But I think JFK had better composure than any modern candidate for.
I think he was just he was just a great talker. He was great at speaking. He was great at he was the first president to he was actually that did live press conferences. Anything before him that was he's the one that started the live pressers. Anything but was that your mom?
No.
I was about to say you better answer to that.
No. No, everybody knows I'm recording. If they call me, they just get sent the voicemail.
He was the first president to do live press conferences that were basically before him. It was thought to be a bad idea for a president to talk off the cuff. You know, to like they
Not read from the script.
anytime you had an interview with him, with the president before Kennedy, it was going to be you were going to do your interview and they were going to dress it up. With him, he was the first one that was like, "Nah, turn the camera on."
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing that goes along with his honesty. It kind of helps him. You see him more as a person rather than just a lying average politician.
He seemed like a normal person.
Yeah, and that's what gained that. At least now, like you said, we can't know what people thought back then, but at least now that would gain a lot of respect and a lot of. I think it would restore confidence in Americans.
Like you said, see him more as a person, more than just.
He didn't seem out of place, no matter who he was standing next
That's
to.
good.
And
I
that's
think that
good.
has a lot to
Needs
do
to
with
be.
my like fascination. It's like, man, he seems like such a cool dude.
And see, we weren't taught any of this in middle school, high school.
Not this deep. I mean, there was like a couple things.
Yeah, I mean, it's like JFK was shot. Lee Harvey Oswald did it. He did it at
No
this
questions
place,
asked.
this date. That's it.
That's all they want you to think.
And when you just see all this stuff, it's like, man, there was a lot of stuff that he did that y'all just didn't teach us. You just
His
taught us that he died.
assassination is like that's like most people know him because he was assassinated,
Yeah.
and they don't. There's not been a presidency like I said a second ago, he was president for 1,000 days. Name me one presidency that was that just full of just
Energy and passion. Well, passion too. He had
all
he
the
was
things that
patriotic.
happened.
He was he was extremely pro-America.
Mm-hmm.
He was pro-Americans.
There's
and
there's been a few where it's been pretty, but that 1,000 days was action packed. You know what I mean? It was good TV to see the president who, at that point in time, people must have been so. I mean, I wonder what they thought. This first time ever they're seeing the president cut on TV and actually describe to the American people what his plans are to do this and what's going on. You know,
well, it's more engaging for the population.
He would come on like a Wednesday night and just talk to the American people about how bad the economy is and what we need to do to fix it. You know. He would do things like he stayed in touch with the American people.
And that's another thing is his communication, you know, all these things, you know, honesty, communication, all of that is extremely important to people. Yeah, and when you see it in your presidency,
if you're going to be a politician, you have to be a good explainer.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not, you're just
then you're not.
Nobody knows what you're doing.
Yeah, nobody. Well, and then you've got. Well, see, and that's another thing is back then the media wasn't as bad as it is now, but I think the media has always misconstrued things to their liking. But even back then, because he was so open, it was kind of hard to do that. Kind of like how we saw with Donald Trump. You're fake news. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
You know Donald Trump
if you go back
and
if you go back and watch his press conferences, they attacked him just like they did every other.
But he was honest about everything he did, and he
was very witty too. He was, and one thing that I would say that is very similar.
Yeah.
With the way that Trump did, the only difference was he was so much more witty and so much more.
Well, he was more composed.
You did exactly.
Yeah, he didn't nobody get in his head.
You didn't. He was. Yeah, he was.
Well, Donald Trump's problem was he not only did he believe he was right, and a lot of people also believed he was right, but he had the media throwing like just kind of what would you call that when it was like doubt in his face,
right?
And I think that got to him, and he was trying not to show it.
I think a lot of it had to do with him. He was already hated by so many before he even announced he was even going to run.
And that's another problem. But anyways,
TV
without
shows
all of that,
and stuff like that.
So you got the Cuban Missile Crisis.
All right, yeah. So the Cuban Missile Crisis. All right, so basically what happened was we already, like I talked about the Bay of Pigs, there's tension between
us and Cuba,
the United States, Cuba, and the Soviet Union.
Now, Cuba was an ally to the Soviet Union.
I heard you guys talking on your earlier video, the Cold War. This is in the middle of the Cold War.
Yeah, I remember us seeing that. The Cold War started in 54, I believe.
I think it was 47.
47, okay. And then it ended in
91.
91.
Okay, okay. And so the Cuban Missile Crisis just happened, dead in the center of it.
Dead in the middle, yeah.
Basically what happened with the missile crisis is the Soviet premier, Khrushchev, and
I just want to
Cuba's
say that
dictator.
The Cold War began in 1947 and ended in 91. You were right.
Thank you. All right, so the Cuban Missile Crisis. So the Soviet premier, Nikita Khrushchev, and the dictator of Cuba, Fidel Castro, are becoming more and more and more friendly with each other. Basically, whenever the Bay of Pigs happened, what I talked about a minute ago, that inflamed that. And like I said, the meeting after that, with Khrushchev was convinced he'd get the better of Kennedy. So basically, he decided to do this without the United States would be in the dark about this, and he was going to do this, and somehow he's going to pull it off. You know, you just think about that.
Yeah,
that is scary.
You know, so basically what they're doing is they're sending all their nukes, some of their nukes, to Cuba, and they're going to point them at the U.S.
And that's what started.
That's what they thought they were going to do. Well, basically, they were in construction. This was in construction. We were doing U-2 reconnaissance flights over, and somebody came back and said, "Y'all need to look at this." You know? So they found it, and then Kennedy kept it secret for about a week just to see them doing what they're doing up over there in Cuba, and we're
Yeah.
watching what they're doing the whole time. you
And
know?
he wanted to keep it.
He
Did he
kept
want
it
to
a secret as long as he could, so they could decide what they were going to do to stay ahead.
Now,
of
was
the
he keeping it
situation.
a secret from the media so that Russia didn't find out, or do you think that Russia already knew and he was just keeping it a secret so the American population didn't freak out?
Both.
So you think that okay?
He did not want the media getting a hold of this and going around and talking about it. He wanted to keep this thing to himself and his team as long as he could,
so he could get this situation
until
under control.
either the media, knowing the media is going to get this. This
Yeah.
is going to happen, you know. So what he did was Tuesday, October 22nd, 1962, he comes out and he gives the speech.
Mhm.
You know, this is what we're doing. And then he announced we're going to do the blockade. So basically, we basically just they sent the ships out there to block the rest of the stuff from coming, and we negotiated with Khrushchev to get the rest of that stuff out. Ended up, what we had to do was we had to take our missiles out of Turkey, which is kind of at Russia's elbow, sort of, kind of.
So they moved, we moved.
Right. And
Okay.
then that was kind of it.
But and I remember me and you were having a conversation about this earlier. So
Khrushchev did it, and then immediately when he saw Kennedy's response, it's like he realized how stupid that was.
yeah.
You know,
Well, you said that,
He thought
that
he
Kennedy
could do-
wasn't
he-
going to make
I think-
it publicly known
right.
either.
I think he knew what Khrushchev was trying to do and was going to make him look as bad as he possibly could.
And that
once
didn't
he
happen.
once he knew, you got to think this evidence is in his hand a week before he comes out and tells the American people, "Hey, this is what's going on in Cuba."
Yep.
You know, so and then whenever he comes out and does his speech, he gives every detail. They got all these planes. They're taking over there in crates. They're pointing medium-range ballistic missiles. They could hit anywhere over here in the U.S. on the eastern seaboard. You know,
They could have just
so
tore
you know,
us
if we're
up.
just like that, he's already, you know, it's already got to be like
yeah.
what is going through Khrushchev's head.
Yeah.
I got to
Because-
get these out of here.
Yeah.
And
Because
he
it will-
told the world,
America's-
he told the world basically, if a nuclear weapon is fired from Cuba anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, we're going to consider that attack by the Soviet Union on the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be war.
And that's
War
what
III,
ended it.
baby.
That's what ended it. So that's got to be like the crowning achievement of his presidency. That's got to be like
Standing up to
Right.
the bully.
right. That's got to be the biggest thing that happened.
So now, following this up, from this to the time of his assassination, was there anything, notable or anything this big or any more curveballs that were thrown at him that are like worth noting?
Not really foreign of this domestic. The domestic situation is getting out of hand with civil rights.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the segregation that's what's going on at that point in time.
Mhm.
Civil rights is like one of his. That's what they're trying to do. Not just him. I mean, they've been trying to do it, but
Yeah.
he's finally introduces a civil rights bill.
Yeah, well,
To Congress.
he was the one that was.
This would have been.
It was one of his concerns.
This would have been early 1963 when he introduced the.
Yes.
I would say probably, I can't remember if it was March or April or. But anyways, that was basically everything had to do with civil rights for the most part.
Yeah, 63.
Yeah. And then I mean, I don't really think there really wasn't much more going, other than, like I said, the civil rights was a huge problem.
Now, when you say a huge problem, you mean like nobody could agree on it, or it was just something that he couldn't get
There's
past?
rioting in the streets.
Oh, my
And it was
goodness.
rioting
There's,
from pro-civil rights
there's,
activists or anti-civil rights activists, like
both.
people that want. Okay,
Both. It's you.
so everybody
you can
was just
imagine-
outraged.
We all know how the country was before the civil rights. You know.
Yeah.
Now think about like after. We know how it is after now,
Yeah,
but before, and you got to think. Every person's allowed to vote now.
yep,
Yeah.
You know, every person, no
Yeah.
matter their color or anything.
Yep.
You know, and how that bothered people. You know,
unfortunately.
so that was basically what he was dealing with in '63. I think he had a big trip to like Ireland, maybe Berlin. He had a big speech in Berlin.
So he was voted in 1960, and then just all this stuff was thrown at him, early on in his presidency. And then, you've got the Cuban Missile Crisis. You've got all these civil rights problems.
Technical difficulties with the phone, as always, but we're going to get back to where we was at.
I feel like that happens all too often.
We were talking about civil rights, and then now we're going to get into the days leading up to JFK's assassination.
Yeah. All right, so basically, the civil rights is going on, and it's going to utterly affect Kennedy's chances in the upcoming 1964 election. You figure he's going to lose some southern states. So the days leading up to his assassination, what he's doing is he made a trip to Florida. They decided basically we need to go to Florida, we need to go to Texas. He can lose some southern states, but he cannot lose Texas.
Yeah,
He can't lose Texas.
Yeah.
Stomping ground.
So basically, those last few days leading up, they were basically the kickoff to the 1964 campaign. He hadn't really even formally announced yet that he was going to run, but he almost certainly would have been reelected. I mean, no matter who he would have ran against.
Yeah.
So November 21st, they end up in 1963. They fly to Texas, and I think it was maybe a 5-city tour. I think they did San Antonio on the 21st, and they ended up at Fort Worth that night.
Okay.
So he had, I don't know. I'll research that. Why don't you? So during this 5-city tour, was there anything obscure that happened? Was there anything off that was going on?
It went really well.
Really?
He was received politically very well in Texas. Actually, basically, Jackie went with him.
Okay.
And she, I don't know, y'all, I guess y'all really, she wasn't really into politics. She didn't do a lot of politicking with him. She didn't go around on a lot of his trips with him.
But I guess he thought it looked good.
She did a lot of things, and the whole idea was they were, the governor of Texas, Governor Connolly, he thought it would be a good idea to get Jackie to come along with him. I think it would be a huge help. For those who didn't like Jack Kennedy, Jackie was a disarming figure, So she actually had just lost a child. They had just lost a child in September.
Wow.
August or September. And she had been in a state of depression and was just kind of gradually coming out of that. And she decided she was going to go on a trip with the president and help the president.
Gotcha.
She actually, the day before, the 21st, they had a trip in San Antonio, and she actually spoke to some of the citizens who were Hispanic in Spanish.
She can speak Spanish?
Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She was a fascinating woman. So they wound up in Fort Worth, and they spent the night at the Hotel Fort Worth in Texas. The Hotel Texas in Fort Worth. So that's November 21st, Thursday, November 21st, 1963. So Friday they get up, and he has that night, or that morning, is whenever the speeches in Fort Worth happen. There's one in the parking lot, and then there's a Chamber of Commerce or something actually inside the hotel. So he addresses the general public outside, and he comes inside with all the dignitaries and does his speech there. And that was his last speech. He was headed right after they left Fort Worth. They flew to Dallas, which was about a 5-minute flight. And then here we are. We're in Dallas now, November 22nd, 1963.
So leading up to the assassination, I'm sure there was a few events that happened. Probably not much, but the day of the assassination, and before he decides to hop in the Lincoln. What goes on? Is there anything?
They land. They like I said, the Fort Worth stuff. They fly to Dallas Love Field, and he is met with a huge crowd of people, and they are just. He's like going around. There's actually I saw it on YouTube. There's a video of him arriving in Dallas, Air Force One arriving, and the throngs of people. He would go up and touch. He wanted people sometimes to reach out and touch him, just to like.
Well,
he wanted to be accessible.
Human factor.
He wanted to be accessible to the people.
Yeah, exactly.
Knowing that this was a political trip. Texas was like he needed to mend fences in Texas. There was a big brawl going between Governor Connolly and a senator in Texas by the name of Ralph Yarborough, who was also in the motorcade that day.
Mhm.
So the reception was warm. Everything about the Texas trip went so good, considering there was like Johnson. There was several guys. A few weeks before that, Adlai Stevenson, the ambassador, one of the ambassador to the United Nations, went to Dallas, and he was spat upon and hit with a clacker. And his people were telling him, I don't even think it's a good idea to go to Dallas. Dallas was the hotbed for the most conservative people in Texas.
So you mentioned this being a 5-city tour.
Right.
Was this the last of those days? Was this the last of those tours?
He was due in Dallas. He was going to make a speech at the Trademark for lunch, and they were going over to Austin that night, and he was going to stay in Austin with Lyndon Johnson through the weekend until he came back to Washington.
So
this was it.
So this was his last. This was his last speech. He was done.
He had to go. Well, Dallas was like kind of in the middle. Dallas was like it was towards the end, I guess. He was going to do a lunch. He was headed to do a lunch at the Trademark in Dallas when the assassination happened.
All right.
Okay.
Later that afternoon, he was due in Austin for some sort of same kind of event, a political event. There's going to be food and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
I don't really know all the details. I know that he was supposed to head to Austin.
All right. So now what everybody's been waiting on, the actual assassination. So
Right.
Give us some details, and then we'll kind of go into some speculation around what really happened.
All right. So first off, at that point in 1963, if you just think about this, this gives you kind of the realm. People will wonder, how was he allowed to no president will ever travel that unprotected
Oh,
No.
ever again.
No.
But if you think about this bit of information, so in 1963, there were 200 Secret Service agents nationwide,
Good Lord, there's
Wow,
like
dude.
200,000 now.
and about 35 that guarded President Kennedy all the time. As to where
35.
now we have 3,200
Total?
Secret Service agents nationwide.
Wow.
So essentially, the Secret Service has grown 16 times. They simply did not have the men to go and look at every window and every rooftop throughout the whole line of the motorcade, right?
Yeah.
So the motorcade goes swimmingly. I mean, there's people along, there's huge crowds of people. I mean, it's like, and like I said, Jackie was with him. It's like just this amazing thing that's happening in Dallas. They're nuts. They're nuts about this guy.
Yeah.
So nearing the end of the motorcade, he comes up on the big curve, and it's like a big sharp. He's going from Houston to Elm, I think were the streets. Maine and Houston and Elm. I get the streets mixed up sometimes. Dealey Plaza is where they wind up at.
We can find a diagram of this and put it up.
So once he turns onto the motorcade route off of Houston onto Elm, it's a big sharp corner. And as soon as he turns and gets going toward the Trademark, under the triple underpass, the Texas School Book Depository is directly behind him over his right shoulder.
Cool.
Right here. The grassy knoll would be up here on the right. So they get going down through there, and, he's waving, and the crowds have died down some. It's not as many people right here in this area where it all happens as it was earlier in the motorcade route. And then shots ring out.
And how many shots were reported by the news? And then how many is speculated that
It's
actually...
speculated. Some people say the witnesses there. This is interesting to me. A lot of the witnesses there, particularly Bill and Gail Newman, you should look them and people up and research them a little bit if you ever want to read about it. But they were the closest, basically, to it. They were right on the edge of the street as it was happening.
Was that the one with the kids?
They had their
Okay,
small
that's
children
not-
with them,
okay.
right? They swore that the shots were fired from the knoll behind them. They were standing on the grassy knoll pretty much.
Mhm.
There's a picket fence up there on the knoll.
Gotcha.
They swear the shots came from over. That's where that came from. Eventually everybody goes towards the.
Warehouse.
It's got to be the book depository.
Or yeah, book
So,
depository.
speaking of that, so right as the assassinations happened, a police officer on a motorcycle by the name of Marion Baker, he drops his motorcycle and he goes running into the book depository, and he finds Roy Truly, who is the manager of the book depository building.
Mhm.
And they go up in second floor. You know who they run into?
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Lee Harvey Oswald, right?
Wow.
So Baker actually had him at gunpoint 90 seconds after
The assassination. occurred.
assassination. But basically, it's from what I gather, there's not a lot of information on this.
Well,
this
he worked
person.
there.
So they let
Well,
him
he
go?
worked there.
Yeah.
But what I gather is Baker had his gun on him, and Truly said, "Oh, he's good. He works here."
Yeah,
You know?
that's yeah.
So
Oh,
by the
wow.
time Baker gets in there and they get it all figured out, all right, we're gonna rope off this building. Something happened here.
Yeah,
Oswald's already gotten out,
exactly.
so he's
Well,
already.
I'm sure they're probably like bringing people out. They're probably evacuating the people in the building.
Well, once they got the building, it was like nobody's leaving. We're gonna
Oh,
do roll.
so they
we're gonna
wanted
figure out who left.
So
You
he had already gone. They
That's
had
what it seems
passed
like
him
they
up.
were doing.
Wow.
So Oswald's already gone. They
Okay.
called him on the second floor. He was getting a Coke or something, you know. So eventually they go. Eventually they go up and find a sniper's nest on the sixth floor. But by that time, Oswald's already way gone.
So what
So-
they find? They find a gun.
They found some boxes and they found basically a sniper's nest.
wow.
For people who don't know what that is, how about including
A bunch
myself.
of cardboard boxes stacked on top of each other at a window, and the boxes are placed in a way to where you can sit your rifle on it for comfort and
Oh wow!
just maximum comfort if you're about to
Go
try
assassinate
to do
a
something.
president.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, so after the assassination, they've seen Lee Harvey Oswald run past. They kind of pass him up as he's just a worker. They secure the building. How long does it take before they realize they ain't nothing here?
Well, they find there's not, first off, they don't find a suspect there.
Well, yeah,
They
that's
find
more
the
what I meant.
sniper's nest there. And it's by that time Oswald has already, I don't know his exact route of how he got there, but he's already jumped on a bus or something and wound up all the way on the other side of town at the Texas Theater,
Dang.
where
Okay.
eventually, he runs into J.D. Tippett, the police officer.
Yep.
That's essentially what he got arrested for first. He shot the police officer.
Did he kill him?
He killed the police
did kill
officer. So
And what was his alleged reasoning for shooting the police officer initially? Or what did he
never
say?
admitted to it. He never said that he done it. He said he stayed until his dying day. He said he didn't do anything. He didn't shoot anybody. He was just a patsy.
Wow.
That's what he was talking the whole time.
All right. So
All right, so Oswald's already killed this police officer now. And he goes in the Texas Theater without buying a ticket. And the gal over there selling tickets, I guess she called the police and said, there's this guy that just ran in the theater without paying a ticket. And, eventually they converge on the theater thinking this is the guy that shot the police officer. So they go in there and he puts up a fight, but they get him, He's not able to do anything. They get him they got him in custody now.
Okay.
By the time they get him back to the police station, which ironically is in Dealey Plaza, right across from the Texas
do we have any
School
times
Book
on this? About
Depository.
what time did they catch him?
This would have been probably about 1:30,
So a few hours after the assassination.
about an hour after the
Okay.
assassination.
All right.
Maybe not even.
Okay.
This is, I'm saying, an hour. Now he's at the police station. Maybe an hour later.
Okay. All right. So
The assassination the JFK was shot at 12:30.
Yeah.
Oswald was picked up about 1:30,
Okay, I got you.
and he ended up at the police department.
Um,
I guess we'll say 2:00 or something like that.
So was he was
By
booked
then,
in process there?
that's
Yes.
once they figure out who he is. That's when it clicks, and they're like, he's the missing employee from the book deposit.
Ah.
So then they go up there and they figure out it is his palm print on the rifle, and they got him.
Gotcha.
But they really got him for killing the police officer.
So they took him to the police station. They booked and processed him for killing the police officer, and then they realized, hey, this is
they
our
put two and two
put
together
two and
and
two
was like,
together.
this is maybe also the same guy that killed the
This is
president.
our guy.
They,
Yep.
they got him at the police station. What about JFK? Is he dead as soon as he gets to the
Yeah, he was
hospital?
dead.
He was
on
he
the
was
scene.
he was killed instantly.
Have you seen the
Instantly?
Zapruder film?
They fixed it to where
I have,
it was 1 o'clock was when they announced that he
Oh,
actually
okay,
passed away.
okay.
But that was really giving them time to get Lyndon Johnson over to Love Field to get swore in and all that logistically for the government. You know,
Okay.
So it was just, they kind of strategically did it so we didn't look weak, I guess.
they didn't want to not have a president.
Yeah,
Or
yeah. Well, that's what I'm
that
saying.
amount of
You know,
time.
you can't look.
So Kennedy, by this time, Lyndon Johnson's getting sworn in on Air Force One,
Okay.
Mhm.
and there's a boatload of Kennedy loyalists on the back of the airplane who, in their mind, Kennedy's still the president. You know, that imagine of loss of power and then the triumph for Johnson, something he's always wanted. Getting it.
Yeah.
Well, there's that picture we put in the last video we did. It was him getting sworn in, and then Jackie standing right there beside him
Oh yeah.
with Kennedy's blood all over,
Yeah.
her crying.
So they didn't have a judge. They had to call Judge Sarah Hughes to come out to Love Field to swear him in because they didn't have anybody in the motorcade party that
No.
had the credentials to do it.
Wow. So now back to Oswald. So he was booked, processed. They 2 and 2 clicks. At some point, he was transported again. Correct?
He was moved back and forth in front of the cameras. 15 or 20 times.
Dang.
Wow. Why? Like, what was their reasoning?
This is my thought. I've read a little about this, but Chief Curry of Dallas, the police chief, was doing it basically at the request of the media, hoping that him being the police chief of Dallas, permitting the president to be killed in his town, he wondered what they might write about him. So he was basically doing it for reporters.
Wow. So then when was he transported and then killed?
That would have been 2 days later on the 24th.
Okay, so is there more stuff we need to fill in on prior to this before we jump into that?
They were pretty much they kept putting him in front of the cameras and
They moved him
blaming
moved him
for it.
around in front of the camera. This is the guy.
Okay. Okay.
So the day he was moved and then finally shot by Jack Ruby, I believe,
Yep.
which was a nightclub owner.
Yep.
So give us a little insight into that scenario. How did that play out?
Well, Jack Ruby was not only a nightclub owner, he was like a police hang-arounder. Like I think what the deal was he was letting these cops come in his nightclub and letting them get drinks and
Gotcha.
letting them dance with the ladies and stuff like
So
that.
he was
You think
tight
he-
with the cops.
Right.
Okay.
So they kind of accepted him hanging around police headquarters. That's, I believe, how he got in there and was in the position to do it.
Gotcha. So, but when did it happen? Where did it happen?
This was at the Dallas police station. They were getting ready to transfer him from the police station over to the county jail, I guess. They were getting ready to move him from jail to the other jail in Dallas, basically.
And was it outside of the police station?
It was in an underground parking lot.
Wow. So this
Dang.
was after he was pulled from one cell or right before he was being put into another?
This was in the process of moving him out of that building. They were moving him over to a police cruiser to get him out of there.
And then this buddy with cops just shows up
he
and
just jumps in and shoots him.
so how long? God, I wish this thing would stop doing that. That's so annoying. How long did it take? Or how long did he serve for? How long was he supposed to serve, and how long did he end up serving for the murder of Lee Harvey Oswald? Jack.
Well, he was found guilty of murdering Lee Harvey Oswald. He won an appeal to get a retrial, but died of cancer before he could get it done.
And what kind of cancer
wow.
did he have?
I can't remember, but it
think
was
we-
shortly after the assassination.
I
I
think we
think
talked about that.
67. I think 67 was the year he died. Ironically, the same hospital that Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Kennedy both died at.
67.
So Jack Ruby died January 3rd, 1967 in Dallas, Texas at that same hospital. And he died of well, we don't have any quick.
So he was
tips on
never. Was he ever in jail, or was he just?
Yeah.
Okay, he was.
Yeah, he
Okay.
died in prison,
Okay.
basically.
So
He was appealing his case, and a lot of people speculated that he was going to act. Because, you know, as soon as the man who's accused of killing the president is offed on national television for the world to see, you assume the reason they offed him is so he'll keep his lips sealed.
Yeah.
There, right there, is already the first sign of, like,
what the hell?
you know,
Yeah. It's
was
like
there a conspiracy to kill the president?
Yeah.
You know, like,
so. I don't know where I was going to go with that. So Kennedy's been assassinated. Lee Harvey Oswald's been murdered. Now, I mean, this was obviously years later, and now the guy that murdered Lee Harvey Oswald is dead. So I think that raised a lot of suspicion in people too. Even though he died of cancer, I think that still raised suspicions.
I don't know.
Now, what year did
I don't know that much about Jack Ruby, I'll be honest.
What year did the Warren Commission come into
That was
play?
64. I was getting ready to start talking about that. Okay. So the Warren Commission was basically what happened was there was just as much a big to-do with the hawks and doves of the government with the murder of Oswald as there was with literally the murder of Kennedy. He was like, this ruined their investigation.
Yeah.
Evidence was lost forever.
Well, I think it also ruined the confidence in the American people.
Well, so what happens is President Johnson decides there's going to be a commission to investigate the murder of President Kennedy and figure out what happened.
And when did this commission start?
This would have been 1964.
Do you have like a month, maybe?
Maybe January. It was formulated pretty much immediately. It was headed up by, it's called the Warren Commission. The Chief Justice of the United States at that point in time, his name was Earl Warren. He was the leader.
Oh, so
it started November 29th, 1963.
Yeah, see, immediately after.
So, yeah.
Immediately after. 64 is when they released their findings to the public.
Gotcha. So JFK was killed the 22nd. So this is exactly a week after.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So anyways, I'm sorry. Back to what you were saying.
Have you seen the members of the Warren Commission?
I have not.
It's a bunch of distinguished guys. There's future presidents on the list.
I'll put this picture up with them.
Allen Dulles is on the list. That's kind of weird. He was fired after the Bay of Pigs. He was the head of the CIA. JFK fired him after the Bay of Pigs, and then he's on the Warren Commission investigating his murder.
Wow.
I don't know.
They are.
Gerald Ford, also future president, was on the Warren Commission. Arlen Specter is the guy who came up with the single bullet theory, the magic bullet theory.
And we'll get into that here in just a minute, too.
I'm just going through some of the guys that were on the commission. All right, so what's up?
So, yeah, as far as the commission's findings that you said that they released in 94, I mean, this is
64.
Yeah, what did I say?
You said 94.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. Yeah, in 64. So, you know, the assassinations occurred. Everybody knows, you know, that Lee Harvey Oswald did it. What exactly did they find? What did they release?
The Warren Commission? That's what divides and arouses everybody, you know.
So you want to get into some speculations?
They found basically, the Warren Commission, what it seemed like to me, was the prosecution of Oswald. They didn't look for anything else. So all they were trying to do was figure out a way to make it be Oswald, and this is over.
They wanted to close the door as fast as they could, right?
So they didn't have to deal with it any longer.
They just didn't want any debate. They didn't want to implement Cuba or Russia. They didn't want anything to do with that, go into war or anything like that. You know, so that's what they come up with. They come up with this lone, disenchanted young man with a rifle that day in Dallas ends up shooting the president.
All right, so let's get into
Then it comes out afterwards that Oswald defected from the U.S.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was about to ask about.
And went over and lived in the Soviet Union for a few years. That's strange.
Didn't he bring his girlfriend back too?
His wife.
Oh, his wife.
He married a girl. He met his wife Marina there.
In Russia or in the Soviet Union?
In the Soviet Union, Russia, whatever. Yeah. So they come back, and it's not long before the assassination. He's picked up in New Orleans for passing out communist literature. This dude. Oh wow. This dude. It's like. everybody who was anything in the government knew who this dude was.
But they just didn't
Prior
do
to the
anything.
assassination.
Yeah, the CIA, the FBI apparently was like reading this dude's mom's mail.
What the heck?
Yeah.
You know, they knew exactly where he was. They knew exactly what he was doing. They knew who. I mean, you know,
Apparently not.
Yeah,
it just
well, no.
seemed it seemed to be so easy to blame it on him.
Yeah.
And you know, and it just seems so incomplete.
So do you want to get into
I feel like most Americans are not satisfied with the Warren
Ooh, I
Commission.
wonder. What,
Oh,
I wonder
yeah.
if there's a percentage of that.
like a poll?
Yeah.
I would be willing to bet it's never been below 50.
Mm.
I think at least 50% of the country,
So-
from then all the way to now, at least 50
So between
has always
like political,
not been
Ooh,
satisfied.
61%.
wow, disapprove.
That they well, this was 2013. 2013, 61% of Americans believe that someone else was involved.
Right.
So speaking of that, let's go into that. Do you, as far as Lee Harvey Oswald, the CIA, you know, there's speculation around some mobs in Russia, the Cuban government, you know, anything, you know, any insiders. What is all the speculation around? Who could have possibly been involved, and why or why not would those make sense? Did I ask that right?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, really. Well, the CIA, Kennedy was trying to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces. He hated the CIA.
So they hated him.
They hated him.
Okay.
The CIA was also involved deeply in the Bay of Pigs, which was the biggest disaster of Kennedy's presidency, loss-wise, anyways.
Yeah.
That was his biggest loss, I would say.
Besides his life.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But anyways, it's hard to like. It's hard to
shouldn't
point
have
at,
said that.
It's hard to point at one thing and say this is. It's easy to say the CIA. It seems like Oswald had something to do with the CIA.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if of a person you can point at.
Well, I mean,
and
he
be like this is why.
Well, I mean, like you said, he was on a CIA watch list. He may not have known somebody. They might have came to him. If that's a that could be a speculation.
That's kind of what it seems to me. Seems like he was put there in that building, knowing that there's going to be a motorcade coming around there.
So you think it has more to do around
It happened,
something on the
it
inside?
happened too good for it to be like just
Yeah,
a
it was-
coincidence that this guy who's being watched by the government is in a position to shoot the
Too
president.
pristine.
Well, now, so who do you think would have put him there, though? I guess is more my question. Do you think maybe the CIA was like, hey, you know, we've got this guy. It'd be easy to pin it on him. You know,
Oh yeah,
we've been reading his mom's mail for
He's
know.
definitely a bailout if there is somebody else.
That's the thing. It's easy for him to be the fall guy.
So and then
But as far as who it was, I don't know. It's hard. That's the whole thing.
now in your own personal
believe
belief,
there's a second shooter?
Absolutely.
Or third
Well,
shooter?
that's
I don't
exactly what I'm
know.
about to
I don't
say.
even know.
Fifth
I don't
shooter.
know that there's a second. I don't know that there's. I'm confident. This is what. Okay, so years later, Governor Connolly and his wife Nellie, they were riding in the jump seats in front of Kennedy and Jackie in the motorcade.
Yeah.
Roy Kellerman was the Secret Service agent driving
Hmm.
the motorcade.
Mhm.
Both the Connollys were experienced hunters. They knew all about firearms and all that. And they were told, they were described, this is what the Warren report came up, this is what they decided. Oswald fired, you know, and they like, Jackie said, I don't remember it happening that way.
Mm.
You know?
Wow.
She was
The
there.
Connollys both, like I said, were experienced with guns. They didn't really. Governor Connolly from the get-go said Kennedy was shot and then he was shot.
Oh.
But the Warren Commission says that the shot that hit Connolly went through Kennedy first.
Well, I will say
Pretty
this.
sure
I
the
know
man
that
got
Connolly-
shot would know.
Connolly says that he was looking this way toward his left
Mhm.
and then looked back to his right after he heard the first shot go off.
Mhm.
And then he felt like he got shot. You know?
Well, I will say I've heard from
Roy
people who have
Kellerman-
been shot that'll say that like
Yeah.
you don't feel
So-
it until after you see it or after you think
Connolly,
about it.
Connolly swore up and down that he was shot after Kennedy was
I
shot.
wasn't there,
And he said it
I
wasn't.
mean, it was his experience. He
said
probably
it-
knows.
He said
Yeah,
it
I'm
wasn't.
Sure
He said it wasn't like He never thought they got hit by the same bullet. He thought Kennedy was shot, he was shot, and then Kennedy was shot again.
So I guess that
that's
goes
how
into
they
the
felt.
magic bullet theory.
Roy Kellerman, the driver of the limousine, said we were hit with a flurry of shots, including one from the front.
Oh,
So there's two. I guess there's two questions that come from that. Then, so not do you think there was a second shooter, but do you think that Lee Harvey Oswald was actually the person that pulled the trigger?
I think he pulled the trigger. I think he was definitely in on it.
oh yeah.
The whole thing is like, there's no way he did this on his own.
No, yeah, definitely
Knowing
not.
the capabilities of this young man
Well,
at
he
that point
was-
in time, knowing how just,
Well, it was stated in his Army records, or it was Army, right?
he was just average.
Yeah, he was just
Everything
average.
about him was like
Average
just-
height, average capabilities.
So he could have hit one shot, but not.
It's hard to
all three of
believe.
them.
It's hard to believe you could take that clunky rifle and
Yeah,
fire 3 pretty on target shots
yeah.
in 6 seconds.
So, and speaking of 3 shots, there's a lot of controversy around that. When we look at the obituary, not the obituary, when we look at the autopsy and when we look at what the news reports, I've heard there's some difference. So, how many bullets are speculated to have hit him, and how many bullets did the media report hit him?
Let's talk about it's
that a little bit.
always been 3. It's always been it's always been 3 shots. So the first shot, they say the first shot. This is what the Warren Commission says.
Mhm.
The first shot hit Kennedy in the back, exited a knot in his necktie.
Mm-hmm.
Then it went traveling through. Basically, Kennedy was sitting in the back like this, up. Connolly would have been sitting at an angle kind of like this, directly in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
So it is feasible. You could see how it lines up.
So JFK was more, just for those who are listening, was more in the central back seat, and then
He was back and further over. He was higher.
He was toward the back and the right.
Yeah.
Connolly was toward the in front.
well, he was in
and
the
a little bit to
driver's
the
seat.
left.
Yeah. So-
Connolly and his wife sat in the middle, and Jackie and Kennedy sat in the back.
Gotcha. All right. So
And they were sitting in a way to where, like, the jump seats in the back were up higher. So they were sitting like this, and then Nellie and the Connollys were sitting more like this.
gotcha.
Kind of like
Like
know,
skewed to the side just a little bit.
his right shoulder would have been kind of like at JFK's left shoulder.
Gotcha. So, and this is the magic bullet theory, actually, I believe,
The bullet
right?
goes through Kennedy's back, and it comes out in a knot in his necktie, and then it goes through a bunch of bones and Connolly and comes out. It's trash. It comes out and busts a bunch of bones and comes out looking like somebody shot it in some water.
Yeah, perfect. We'll put a picture of
Have
that
you
up.
seen what bullets do when you shoot things with them?
Oh, yeah, here's a picture of a regular bullet, by the way.
Definitely.
Any bullet. If you go and just shoot something and then you find the bullet, and like say you just shot that wall, when you find that bullet, it's going to be.
Well, it's all mangled
kinds
up,
of
it's
mangled.
crumpled, and if it's a hollow point, it's even worse.
I
It's
just
all
don't
mushroomed
understand.
out
And when they
flared up.
find this bullet on a stretcher at
Common
Parkland
stretcher,
Hospital,
right?
and they find this bullet, and they're like, "Hey, this must be the one." You know, it's like they just like, "Hey, this must be the bullet."
Oh, my
You know,
God.
and it's like almost in pristine condition. It just makes no sense.
So, as far as that's concerned, do you think
But-
it was just planted there?
I don't know.
As probably, kind of
Fell out
helped
of
to fuel the
Connolly's pocket.
conspiracy.
It's hard to believe. I mean, we're talking like that bullet. It went Kennedy. It went through his back and came out like his windpipe, basically.
Yeah.
Through his neck, not in his necktie. It ravaged Connolly. I mean, it broke it went through his shoulder and went through his chest and landed in. It broke 2 or 3 bones.
Mm.
I think it went through his wrist and then landed in his leg and broke this big bone in here. And then it comes out looking like
No way.
Yeah,
somebody dropped it on the
No way.
ground or
Yeah,
something.
well- not going to happen.
That's just hard to believe for me. But anyways, that's what it says. It says the first shot was that, and the second shot missed entirely, and the third shot took Kennedy's head.
So, yeah, and we've seen that
That
video.
is your Warren Commission findings.
So now we go back to obviously he didn't do this by himself. We can
Doesn't
pretty
seem
much
like it.
we can pretty much infer in good faith that this was not taken out by Lee Harvey Oswald himself. So we talked about maybe the CIA put him there, but what about Russia or somebody from the Cuban mafia or anything like that? Do you think any of that is possible?
I mean,
I personally don't believe
this is
so.
what I tell people. Anything's possible because we don't know the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really know because they won't tell us.
They probably never will.
I don't know what they're waiting on, honestly. I think it's just going to take the people standing up and just if this just made a resurgence and everybody was on the JFK files, I think they would come out. I think we could get them out.
Yeah.
But there's
Awesome.
just not enough people interested enough in it to be outraged.
You were telling me you're on like a little subscription email list kind of thing. You get notifications anytime something relating this topic is released.
Right.
Around how many files do you think have been released? Just roughly.
A lot. I don't know the exact number. Thousands.
Wow. So
None
a
of
good
them-
many. None of them really.
None
give
of the stuff that
any
we're
insight.
talking about right now. That's the stuff that they're hiding.
Yeah.
You know.
So if you had one
If-
thing to
if-
leave,
If what you have is Oswald is the lone gunman, and he pulls this off by himself, if that's what you tell us happened. If that's all that these files show, why not release them out?
yeah, I think that's a
Yeah.
It
very
makes
good
me
point.
think
Yeah.
that that's not what it is, because if they would they'd want us to know, oh, we were right.
Yeah.
You know, obviously, whatever it is contentious. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Whatever
yeah.
it is some serious business.
You say it like it's already been like 60 years. So the longer it progresses and more generations are born, they kind of just want it to be put under the rug.
I think they want when they release them, they want it to not matter.
Yep.
I think is what it is.
If you had anything to put out there for anybody listening or watching, I mean, I would certainly encourage people to go do their own research into this. And
Every American should. If you're an American citizen and you're not outraged by this still, I don't understand. I don't understand why this doesn't bother you.
yeah, I definitely believe it should, especially as outrageous as politics now
I understand
are.
this was like our grandparents' heyday when this happened.
Yeah.
This is not before our time, but this is really the first time that we know the government lied to us.
Yeah, and it's one of as we were talking about earlier, this is like the father of conspiracy
Oh,
theories.
This is the ultimate conspiracy because we all know. We know it's a conspiracy. We know that they know,
Yeah, we know
and they
that
won't tell us.
exactly, and that's what really
Yeah.
sucks. So, I guess that's all I've got. Do you have any more information you think that should be put out there? Anything we might have missed out?
Just do your research. I think it'd be a good idea. There's tons and tons and tons and tons of material on this. You can go to the JFK library. There you can find it on YouTube anywhere. There's all kinds of information there. There's all kinds of documentaries and stuff. But it's just we need to get these files out. The only way to do it is for everybody to be outraged about it.
Yeah, and that's all we can encourage you to do is for you to be vocal and for you to voice your opinions about this. Because without it, it's just a big, rabbit hole as you were talking about
it's
earlier.
gonna stay put up unless we push it out.
So
A healthy society needs the truth.
I 100% agree. Like honesty from JFK. I think that's what made us a better country. But as far as that goes, that's all we have on the JFK assassination. We hope you guys enjoyed this kind of interview-ish video.
I certainly enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. I learned
some new
a
stuff.
lot.
Yeah, I did too.
I really appreciate you coming on. And if you guys have any questions, this video will come out 2 weeks from when we recorded it today. So if you have any questions, just send us
On
I guess,
email,
yeah,
anything,
Instagram,
in the
anything.
comments, anywhere.
Send us your questions. We work with this guy, so we can ask him, or we can do our own research, or we can cite you something. Also, don't forget to leave us your opinions, your reviews.
Yep.
And John, you want to end it on anything else?
No, that's pretty good.
All right.
That's it.
Thanks for coming on, Kevin.
no
we had a good
Thank
time.
you, Kevin.
I enjoyed it.
Y'all take it easy,
Thank you
and
guys
don't
for
forget
having me
to like, subscribe,
Share it
and
to everybody. Do your own research.
join us for the next video.
See you in the next one.
Take it easy.
Peace.
Deuces.